Where did you start out?
Well, I'm from Eugene, Oregon originally. I was born in Eugene.
That's the northwest part of the United States.
Pacific Northwest, yeah.
Specifically the Pacific.
Specifically the Pacific.
That's easy for you to say. All right, no. Let's ask the question. Now, did you start out as a Muslim? Is that how you started out? Or?
No, I was raised in a Catholic family, actually, and I grew up, practicing Catholicism, going to church every Sunday with my parents and this type of thing. But just as a young man, I started searching, as a rebellious young American youth. I started looking into everything and having your own mind and being rebellious against everything. And so I just didn't feel anything really for the church. So I started searching, I said to myself, let's see what everybody else believes in the world. So actually, I was quite, being from Southern Oregon and everything in that area, it's quite a beautiful environmental place. It's a lot of beautiful mountains and trees, and I very much was attached to the environment in the outdoors. And so I started, looking into what was being done to the earth, environmentally, and it really disturbed me. I saw some of the political ramifications of that and such that, corporations were basically exploiting the reserves of the forests and such and cutting them down, and it really disturbed me. I wanted to live a natural lifestyle, and so me and some friends, we were into horses, and we used to ride in the mountains and camp out and such. And after high school, we said, why don't we move out onto a piece of land and live this natural lifestyle that we want to live, an alternative lifestyle, as you would, So I basically became a hippie in a way. I had long hair and, I had a horse. I had no car.
Now, did you have this big beard?
I had a big beard, yeah. I had a full beard probably as a senior in high school.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So, and that was probably fairly unusual, but I was really different anyway, in the way I was thinking and in the way I was heading.
MashaAllah.
So we moved out onto a piece of land and started living this natural lifestyle. And
when you're off in solitude like that, and there's time for reflection, what types of things goes through your mind as regards belief or faith or God or things like that? Does anything come up?
Of course, being in a really serene environment where it's silent and it's beautiful, it reminds you of God's creation, and your mind clears up a lot too. You kind of start thinking clearly. It's hard to explain, but if you spend a lot of time out in a quiet solitude kind of a place, you start hearing more of your own inner voice almost. You start thinking clearly and you start remembering God. And I always believed in God. I mean, it wasn't that I, absolutely ever stopped believing God. I always knew there was a God, raised as a Catholic. I just didn't quite understand, the way that they understood it. I just didn't, I needed to find my own path and what I believed in. And so I started reading and I started searching. Like I said, what does everybody else in the world believe? So
you looked at different religions.
I looked at different religions.
What are some of the religions you looked at?
Well, being into horses and being close to nature, I was very attracted to the American Indians' religion, actually, of trying to live in peace and harmony with your Creator, and viewing the creation as your brother, kind of, and this type of thing. And I spent some time with some Indian medicine men. We used to go into the sweat lodge and stuff like this, and I really was, looking into what they believed in and what were they practicing, and I would pick up anybody's book almost and read it. Some friends were traveling through the airport, and these Hare Krishnas giving out books at the airport. So we would, hey, all right, cool. We would take anybody's book and read it. I would take some of these books home, like these things, and look through them and read them and see, what does this person believe in? What do they believe in? What are they saying? What's right and what's wrong? What's yes and what's no? And sometimes you would end up completely baffled. You read the book and you think, what did I learn from that? I don't understand at all what they were talking about. It wasn't clear at all, some of these teachings. So Buddhism, Hinduism, American Indians religions. I was raised as a Catholic, so the Bible and Judaism, anybody's religion almost I would look into. I'd listen to gurus and all kinds of stuff. Anybody who thought they were on a spiritual kind of path or something, I was open to listening to. So it turns out that there was one man amongst us who gave us a Quran, a simple English translation of a Quran, and he basically just said, "You're looking at all these books, you're reading these different books of religion. Here, read this one," with no real introduction or no real explanation or no real proselytizing or anything. Just, here's another book. This one's from the Muslims. It's called the Quran. It's, read this one, And so I started, reading that book. And we used to sit around the campfire like this when we were living out in the mountains. I was living in a tent. And we used to discuss the theologies and the ideas and the concepts that we were reading about or thinking about or contemplating, And we used to sit around and discuss it, and share the books. Hey, let me read that book when you're done. I got one for you, and, let's check it out. So I read the Quran. And unlike any of the other books I had read, it just was very straightforward and very clear and really touched my heart. When you read in the Quran, there's one creator, one God, and he needs to be worshipped alone, directly, exclusively, and that he sent all of these prophets, and that those prophets were brothers. I just sat there and nodded my head and went, okay. Kind of as a skeptical American, almost, you read these books with, let's find out what's wrong with this book, rather than what's right. Almost like, let's see if I can find what's wrong with this book that I don't agree with. So I started reading and I was like, I agree with that. I agree with that. That makes sense. I didn't find things that I disagreed with. I found, of course, some things I didn't understand. It was just a very simplistic kind of a translation, too, of the Quran. Very, very simple and very straightforward. It was actually meant for like students who had to take an Islamic course in school, and it was just but it really made sense to me, and I really believed in it. It already, as I said, I already believed that there was one God and one Creator. So when I read that, I said, I believe in that. And it says that you should pray. Like, for instance, in the Quran, it tells us we should pray in 3 parts of the day, in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. Without the understanding or the explanation of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he taught us that it's 5 prayers a day. But if you just read the Quran, it actually mentions 3 parts of the time. And so I thought, that's a good idea. Yeah, you should pray, And I didn't know anything, of course, of the Sunnah at first. And it all took years and took time and took exposure. Actually, I didn't know Muslims, never been to a mosque, never been to an Islamic country, and I was completely wide open too. It was a blessing in a way because there was no prejudice in my mind. Islam and Muslims, I was just blink, what's that? I had no idea at all, about it. This was long ago. It was about 1982 when I became a Muslim. That it was kind of before.
That was before all the Muslims were terrorists.
Exactly. This was before, like, even the West knew anything about, mostly, in general, the West knew much about, like, for instance, one of the first things that brought Muslims in the Middle East and Islam into the Western view that I could remember was the Iranian hostage crisis.
Okay, no, you're talking about Iran. There were Muslims. They were in the United States. There were some hostages taken. I remember about that thing. Did that have an effect on your thinking?
I didn't have a negative view of Muslims. I didn't know anything about Muslims, So whoever those guys were and whatever they were doing, it just was, it didn't really hit me as, like being Muslims or anything like that. It was a political thing.
So you were not even thinking about, okay, he's an Iranian Muslim. You're saying he's an Iranian politically oriented person.
Sure, they must have had an unjust government, so they overthrew their government, and this type of thing was going on in South America.
No relation to God, to Islam.
I wasn't thinking about, really relating it to Muslims or religion. It was political to me.
So could that be some of the problems we see today?
Partly. I mean, but sometimes people are trying to inflict religion into it more than it is sometimes. Sometimes things are political, and there is injustice going on in the world. And sometimes people want to twist things around a little bit and say it's going on because of just their religious beliefs, not necessarily because of injustice. You know what I mean? So anyway, I was wide open to different ideas and things like that. So when I read the Quran, it struck me, and I believed in its basic, clear message of there being one creator. And specifically that, like Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad were brothers in the same faith, that the religion was one with them. And they teach, in essence, the same message of worshiping the Creator alone and following the Prophet during that time, his time. So that made perfect sense to me. That was really clear. And I was living up in the mountains, and I just tried to, live a good life and be a good person. And it was many years actually before I actually met Muslims and started getting involved in actually knowing any other Muslims.
Question. Now, you said it was many years before you met any Muslims. So I want to ask you, were you disappointed?
In a way, yes and no. At first, you meet people from other countries. They have different cultures and different languages and different mannerisms. So sometimes you just write it off as, they're just different in a way, maybe because of his culture and his language and his, this and that. It wasn't until I developed an understanding of what is right and wrong in really Islam more that I understood some of the actions of Muslims are really wrong. You know what I mean? I was so ignorant, in other words, at first, that I couldn't tell you that he was a bad Muslim because I didn't know that much in the beginning anyway, to know that it was a difference between his culture or his religious teachings.
Well, this is fascinating. We're getting so much out of it. We're drawing close to the end of our program. What message do you have for us? What maybe you could tell us what happened that put it all together for you and brought you to where you are now, briefly.
Well, I'd like to mention one really interesting thing that kind of happened was that I used to sit up on the mountain and meditate and pray to God. And I asked him to guide me. No matter what it was, whatever corner of the earth, whatever it was, a far-off land or religion or whatever, I wanted to know the truth, and I wanted to be guided, and I prayed for that before I knew anything about the Quran or anything. And I was living in a remote area of eastern Oregon, and somehow Allah guided me, brought me a Quran when there was no Muslims around really, and really no mosque in the area. And I read that Quran, I believed in it. We used to sit by the campfire and discuss it. And one time we had a problem in the community. We lived like a commune, a community of people living. And somebody had come to our camp, our little place, and had caused some trouble, drank some alcohol, got really, outrageous behavior, caused some trouble with somebody's girlfriend, and there was a big old scene, and boy, there was almost a big violent fight. And we said, hey, we really got to find a way of solving these problems. And let's make this book and what it says our guide. Because I was believing in the Quran. And I said, let's make this, a few of us said, let's make this Quran the rule for our land. What it says is allowed, we allow. What it says is forbidden, we'll forbid. How about we do that? And when I think back of it, it makes my hair bristle almost, because we were trying to establish the Islamic law, the Sharia, without hardly knowing anything at the time.
I wish we have more time. Maybe perhaps another time you'll be on our program with again. If you want to be guided, and this is what happened to me, the same thing, just say those words, "Oh God, guide me."